My name is Diane Mercer. I am 67, widowed before 40, and retired from a lifetime of shelving paperbacks and stamping due dates in a public school on the desert edge of Mesa, Arizona. My house is small and patient, a 2-room place where the air often smells of lemon oil and chamomile, and where the kettle begins to murmur around the same time the sun slides behind the saguaros. I had believed the steepest climb was behind me the day my son Caleb stepped off his college stage with a grin too big for his face. I raised him alone, no partner to split the bills or the long nights, and I told myself that endurance had finally bought us calm. I was wrong. The real testing began the week after his wedding. That morning the doorbell rang. On my porch stood Elise, my new daughter-in-law, beside a neatly dressed man I had never met. He carried a leather briefcase that looked heavier than it was. Elise's smile was careful, as though it had been pressed flat with an iron. Before I could ask a thing, the man followed her into my kitchen, sat at the table as if it were his, and slid a thick folder onto the wood. On the cover, in uncompromising type, were the words, "Power of Attorney." "We just want you to be safe," Elise said, fingers resting on the folder as if it were a sleeping pet. "It's what families do." The kettle clicked. Steam curled up like a thin white ribbon. I did not sit. I did not touch the papers. I have learned that silence is a kind of instrument. If you hold it steady, other people start to hear themselves. The man adjusted his tie. Elise's smile flickered. "I'll have my attorney review it," I said at last. "Your attorney?" His pen paused midair. "Yes," I answered. "2 streets over. He's known me 3 decades. I did not offer a name. I offered a boundary." They gathered their things with courtesy that felt brittle, promised to circle back, and left a faint clone of urgency in the doorway. When the latch clicked, the house exhaled. On the top shelf of the hutch sat a brass key on a small saucer, the weight of a secret that had lived with me so long it felt like bone. My mother Marian pressed that key into my palm the week before she died. "Keep your head clear," she whispered. "Use quiet when the room grows loud." She did not call it a prize. She called it a shield. After she passed, I opened the cedar chest at the foot of her bed, the one that always smelled of lavender and dust. Inside lay a blue folder with my name in her tidy script. There were deeds, leases, and trust papers linked to my late Uncle Thomas, who had once held mineral rights on a rough stretch of land outside Bisbee. Over years, those rights had been sold, leased, and reinvested until the numbers on the page made my hands go cold. My mother had arranged the documents so that I stood as sole trustee, with instructions written in a letter I tucked between the onion skin pages of my old Bible. It was not a triumphant letter. It was spare and directive: guard this. Speak little. Reveal only when you must. The wealth, she explained, was meant to protect a life, not decorate it. I nearly told Caleb a dozen times when he limped home from practice with a split lip, when his car ate its alternator when the rent rose. Each time I almost said it, I heard her voice again. Not yet. Standing in my kitchen after Elise's visit, I understood why the timing mattered. The folder on my table and the folder in my chest were not separate stories. They were 2 ends of a single thread my mother had set in my hand years ago. I rinsed 2 cups, wiped the counter dry, and set the brass key back in its dish. The desert outside hummed with heat. My pulse had the same quiet beat as the kettle cooling on the stove. I did not feel cornered. I felt awake. The test, I realized, was not whether I could sign a form. It was whether I would trade freedom for the appearance of peace. I have lived long enough to know the difference. The wedding was a well-lit machine that Saturday programs stacked like postcards, candles arranged in straight military rows, a quartet sawing the same golden tune until even the air felt lacquered. I wore the navy dress I had once saved for a retirement banquet and pinned my hair back the way Marian taught me, 2 bobby pins crisscrossed like a small gate no one else could see. Mrs. Mercer, a young usher with a clipboard, asked. He checked a list, smiled, and led me through the ballroom to a table near the service corridor, close enough to hear the swing of the kitchen door and the clatter of ice. A tower of white roses sat in the center, so tall it turned the table into a blind corner. "It's lovely," I told him, "because it costs nothing to be gracious." He nodded and moved on. I could hear parts of the vows in pieces, the officiant's voice on a microphone, a tremor of ache in Caleb's, when he said, always a collective sigh, when Elise dabbed her eyes with a linen square folded into a swan. If I leaned left, I could see the tips of their shoes. If I leaned right, only the frosting peaks of the cake. A camera moved like a crane through the middle of the room, obedient to a videographer with a headset and a checklist. I recognized the choreography of importance and the quiet math of where to hide a person. During the toasts, Elise's father told a story about her first internship at a bank in Dallas and how she already spoke the language of numbers. People laughed the way people do when money has a punchline. When the mic came to me, I kept it simple, a toolbox Caleb got for his 8th birthday. The way he aligned the bubble on a level like it mattered, the dignity of doing small things correctly. My words fell into the roses and didn't come back. I clapped for everyone else. I ate the chicken I could barely cut because the knife wanted to argue with the plate. I smiled for photographs no one asked to see. The night moved forward beautifully without me. 3 days later, the doorbell rang at 9:02. And there was Elise again, hair smooth, coat the color of cream heels barely touching the porch. Beside her stood the same man with the leather briefcase. He introduced himself this time Anthony Pike Counsel, as if a name could make the first intrusion gentler by comparison. They stepped into my kitchen like a pair of weather fronts. I brought a revised draft, he said, placing a folder on my table. He had the voice of a person who held patience on a timer. Elise's hands were clasped in front of her, the knuckles pale. Revised, I asked. Fewer signatures, he said, turning pages so I could see paragraphs marching like rows of crops. Simplified authority. It would allow Caleb, he glanced at Elise and Elise, to act on your behalf in certain contingencies. Prevention, not reaction. Elise leaned forward. Mom, we just want to make sure you're protected. We had a scare with my grandmother last year. Everything got so complicated. The kettle hummed. I took 2 mugs down, set one in front of each of them, and poured slowly. Steam stitched the air. I let it sit until it thinned. I'll need Mr. Alvarez to read it, I said, and this time I gave my boundary a name. Daniel Alvarez. He lives 2 streets over. He's reviewed my documents for years. Pike paused pen above the first signature line, a small hover of skepticism that never quite touched the paper. Of course, he said. Sooner is better. Sooner, I agreed, is not the same as rushed. Elise gave a small practiced smile, the kind I recognized from catered lines and charity boards. We're only thinking of you. I believe you think you are, I said, and handed her sugar. They left without finishing their tea. After the door closed, the house seemed to expand by an inch on every side. I fetched the brass key from its saucer and held it for a full minute until the cool turned to warmth in my hand. Then I called Mr. Alvarez. He answered on the 3rd ring, that calm register I remembered from when Marion died, and he explained probate as if it were a recipe, 1 step at a time, no heat higher than necessary. Bring me the whole picture, he said now. Envelopes, letters, anything with a signature. If you have a hunch about why this is happening, write it down and bring the hunch too. Tomorrow morning, I asked. 9, he said. And don't sign anything between now and then, even if they promise you a parade. I laughed, which surprised me. Not my kind of parade. That night, I pulled down the cedar chest from the attic and set it on the rug. The wood smelled like lavender and old paper. Inside the blue folder lay where I'd left it, edges squared. Marion's neat script spelling my name like a blessing that knew its way home. I added the letters, the trusts, the summaries Uncle Thomas's accountant had produced back when I was too young to understand and too stubborn to admit it. I added the envelope with my mother's instructions in pencil on the flap, use quiet. I slept without dreams. Mr. Alvarez's office sat in a strip of buildings whose paint had faded to polite versions of their former selves, mint into celery, coral into sand. His waiting room had plants that looked well-watered but not fussed over. He wore a slate cardigan over a shirt that had been ironed by someone who believed in starch as a philosophy. We took the long route he always did. He started with a blank yellow pad and 3 questions. What happened? Who brought it to you? How did it feel? I told him about the first visit, then the second about the wedding table with the roses that turned celebration into offense, about the way Elise said safe 3 times in one conversation, like a door code you had to memorize before they'd let you out. And Caleb, he asked. He wants things to be smooth, I said. He thinks paper can make emotions tidy. Paper can make authority tidy, Mr. Alvarez said. Emotions never read the documents. He went through the folder methodically, lips moving sometimes as he checked a clause against another copy I'd never known to ask for. He set aside the trust with a small nod I understood to mean solid. He tapped his pen on a paragraph about incapacity that required 2 physicians from different practices to sign identical language after examinations on different days. Your mother knew how to future-proof, he said. This is not a casual arrangement. She called it a shield, I said. A good shield, he answered, and the words felt like a door lock sliding into place. I handed him the revised draft Anthony Pike had left. Mr. Alvarez read it twice, then a 3rd time out loud to himself. Interesting, he murmured. They've added springing language that activates broad powers in emergency circumstances, but they never define emergency. They folded in a custodial clause that would let a 3rd party, presumably the drafter's firm, hold certain accounts temporarily for efficiency. And there's a paragraph about consolidations that sounds helpful unless you've seen it used to move assets into joint vehicles. My stomach tightened, and it means that if you were generous with your signatures and they were ambitious with their interpretations, you would wake up to find your decisions routed through new channels. He slid the draft back to me. We're not going to let that happen. What do we do? He wrote protocol across the top of a fresh sheet. Under it, a numbered list. Credit freeze with all 3 bureaus. Fraud alerts at banks and a voice password no one would guess we chose the name of the street where Marion learned to ride a bicycle. In-person only changes for anything that touches assets. 2 employees present notes printed for your file. A card on your front door that states kindly but unmistakably, no documents will be signed in this home without independent counsel present. A binder with copies of every relevant paper labeled, tabs a short, read me first page that explains your boundaries so you don't have to explain them when your heart is shaking. We set up calls to the bureaus from his office so the changes would be logged from his line. We composed a brief letter he would send to Mr. Pike reminding him that all future communication must go through counsel and asking for digital copies of any drafts in advance by at least 48 hours. We printed 2 door cards, one for the porch, one for the back gate, where well-meaning people think rules are optional. At the end, he pushed a second yellow pad toward me. Write what you fear, he said, as if he were asking me to list the groceries I'd forgotten. I wrote 3 sentences. I fear being made small in my own house. I fear my son mistaking obedience for love. I fear confusing quiet with surrender. He read them once, tore the page neatly at the spiral, and handed it back. Hang this on your fridge. If anyone demands urgency, read it like a prescription. I thanked him and we stood, and he did a thing I never expected from a lawyer. He walked me to the door and said, not as advice, but as acknowledgement, you are not alone. On the drive home, the sky was the particular Arizona blue that makes straight lines look sharper. I felt the edges of the binder against my hip on the passenger seat. I stopped at Bowers Print and Postal to laminate the door cards and to buy a tab set for the binder. The man at the counter asked what label I wanted on the spine. I considered defense, then shook my head and said house rules. He smiled as if that was the oldest answer he'd heard all week. At home, I put the brass key back in its saucer boiled water and sat at the table to write the read me first page. I kept it to 4 lines. I do not sign documents without independent counsel present. All proposals must arrive digitally 48 hours before any meeting. No one aside from my attorney may represent my interests. Urgency is not an argument. I slipped the page into the binder's cover. The kettle clicked. The house breathed. At dinner time, the phone vibrated with a text from Caleb. Can I come by? Just me. I wrote 7 is fine and set another mug on the counter for habit's sake. He arrived with his jacket too light for the evening and the look of a person who had spent all day trying to argue 2 different cases to the same judge, outside to his wife, inside to himself. We sat at the table. He spun his key ring once, then trapped it under his palm like a cricket. Elise says, you're making this difficult, he began. Boundaries feel like obstacles to people who want shortcuts, I said. Sit. T. He shook his head. She thinks you don't trust us. I trust you, I said. I do not delegate my life. That sounds the same to her. It isn't. His mouth pressed into a line. She's worried. Her family there are moving pieces. Moving pieces, I repeated. Caleb, I need you to say what the pieces are. He stared at the binder as if it might answer for him. There were costs. The wedding. Some things were put on cards that were supposed to roll to a loan, and the loan didn't come through yet. Her dad's business had a slow quarter. There was an equity line, and she thinks the fastest way to balance the math is not to trim the party, but to expand the bank that pays for it. He winced. It's not like that. It is exactly like that if the solution to a problem you created is asking someone else to surrender their decision-making so you can fix it without admitting you caused it. He flinched not at the logic, but at the word surrender. I didn't say it to wound him. I said it because naming a thing is how you stop it from owning you. Mom, he said quietly, I want peace. So do I said. But peace that requires a sacrifice of self is just quiet with better branding. He lifted his eyes to mine then, and for a second I saw the boy who had once brought me a quarter he found in a grocery store and insisted we find the person who'd dropped it. I didn't tell him then that the floor keeps what the careless lose. I told him now, I love you. I won't sign. I will always answer when you speak to me with respect. I slid a small card across the table, the same 3 sentences written in the same steady hand I would use to label spices. He read it. He didn't pocket it yet. He placed a fingertip on each line as if testing the weight. She's going to be furious. She already is, I said. Her feelings are real. They are not governing documents. He almost smiled. You and your paperwork. Paper is how the quiet speak in loud rooms, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. He tucked the card into his wallet, stood, and then sat again. Can I ask something? If this wasn't about the papers, would you still, keep the key on the saucer? Keep the house the way it is? Yes, I said. Because this house taught me who I am. The kettle, the roses, the one drawer that sticks. If I hand that over, I might not find my way back. He nodded a little, broken, a little relieved. Okay. After he left, I hung the door card and felt ridiculous for exactly 1 second. Then I remembered Pike's briefcase on my table and felt less ridiculous than prepared. The knock came 2 days later, a split second after the mail truck rumbled off like an omen no one ordered. Elise in a white coat, cheeks bright as if she'd run from somewhere. Anthony Pike briefcase again expression neutral in the way people practice in front of elevators. Caleb stood a step behind them, hands in his pockets, not a glance at the sign. Mrs. Mercer, Mr. Pike said, and stopped when his eyes hit the card on the door. He read it twice. We can talk in the garden. I offered, opening the gate that led to the backyard, where the rosemary grows wild and the chairs are metal and honest. Elise swept in first. Mom, we don't need to make this difficult. We brought the simplest version. It's really just emergency language. I don't sign in gardens either, I said, and pointed to the second card on the back door window. She noticed it and flushed. Pike cleared his throat. We appreciate that you have counsel. We're hopeful he'll see the sense in being prepared. He will see the sense in precise definitions, I said. What qualifies as an emergency in your draft? Circumstances where a principal is unable to act, he said. Temporary, permanent, medically defined. Witnessed by whom, I asked, letting the questions sit in the air like hooks with no worms. He tapped the folder. It's flexible. Flexibility is mercy in a spine, I said. It is not clarity in a contract. Caleb's mouth twitched as if the sentence had bumped into his old sense of humor, and they had nodded to each other across a crowded room. Mrs. Mercer, Elise, said, her voice thinning. If you loved us, you'd make this easier. If you loved me, I answered, calm, as whether you wouldn't make this urgent. We stood there with the rosemary between us, the scent sharp and stubborn. A hummingbird squeaked at the feeder like someone had given it a whistle. I saw Caleb watching the bird instead of our faces, a small act of mercy his own body granted him. Pike closed the folder. We'll liaise with Mr. Alvarez, he said. I'll email him the draft. Good, I said. Please copy me. They left without a handshake. Elise's heels clicked like punctuation none of us had requested. I returned to the kitchen and wrote the date on a sticky note and pressed it to the inside cover of the binder. Then I opened the back door and watered the rosemary slow at the base. It doesn't like its leaves wet. It wants the roots to know what's coming before the rest of it does. Marion taught me that. Later at the supermarket, in line behind a woman buying balloons and a man who'd forgotten his wallet and was negotiating with his own pockets for a miracle, I noticed Elise's car parked at the far end of the lot. She was inside with another woman, her mother, I realized, hands moving in a conversation that had angles. I wasn't close enough to hear. I didn't need to be. Some scenes are subtitles you can read without words. I paid for milk and stamps and a small bag of lemons, then walked to my car, stopping once to tighten the cap on a bottle of oil someone had left half open on a shelf. People mean to be careful. Systems make it easier to fail. At home, I placed the lemons in a bowl by the sink. The brass key watched from its saucer, an ordinary thing that remembered being armor. I wrote a note to myself and slid it under the magnet on the fridge beneath Mr. Alvarez's card. You cannot be cornered in your own house when you wrote the floor plan. That night, sleep came late, and when it did, it was heavy. I dreamed of Marion's handwriting on blue paper and of Caleb's 8-year-old hands turning a screwdriver the right way. I woke with the sun and the sound of the kettle's soft first breath, a house's way of saying, get ready. Outside, the sky had the pale, expectant color of a page before the first line. I did what I have always done when the day feels larger than the person who has to live it. I set out 2 cups, I checked the binder, I watered the roots. Whatever came next, I would not whisper my life away to make anyone else's numbers add up. If they wanted to talk, we would use our voices. If they wanted to sign, we would use our pens. If they wanted to rush, we would let the kettle decide the pace. And if they wanted me small, they would have to bring a ruler that measured something other than love. The email from Mr. Pike arrived before breakfast, subject line wrapped in polite ribbon, proposed emergency authorization streamlined. Mr. Alvarez forwarded it to me with a short note. I'll call you at 10. Don't worry the kettle over this. I opened the attachment and read it twice, then a third time, the way you read a recipe that insists you add salt by feel. Everything looked simple on purpose. The new draft used words like temporary expedient, family, and safety, as if familiarity could be a legal term. Emergency still meant whatever it needed to mean. Unable to act had no physician, no witness, no daylight. There was a handsome paragraph about consolidation that translated with a lawyer's calendar beside it, into move what is yours into what is ours quickly. At 10, Mr. Alvarez's voice came warm through the line. I like their font, he said, and I laughed because it was such a clean place to start. Then we went line by line. He typed while I poured tea. We'll send a counter that removes the fog and keeps what's human, he said. 2 pieces first, a HIPAA release that allows Caleb to talk to your doctors if there's a medical event. That's respect, not surrender. Second, a narrow emergency contact form with your preferences, who calls who where, spare keys live, what medications you take. We will not open authority over your accounts, and we will not dilute the incapacity standard your mother chose. This gives your son a gate to knock at without handing him the deed. He read the draft as he wrote it, plain sentences, no flourishes. If law is a machine, his style was the kind that does not break at the hinge. "Send it," I said when it was done. "You'll get a copy," he said. "I doubt Mr. Pike will sign off." "That's helpful too." "How so?" "It tells us whether this was ever about your safety," he said, "or only about access." By noon, his email had gone out. By 2, an auto reply from Mr. Pike promised a response shortly. I made soup because the air had tilted cool and because soup insists you wait without pretending to be urgent. That afternoon brought the second tactic. Someone knocked with the short, cheerful rhythm of delivery people. When I opened the door, a woman in a blazer stood there with a tote bag and a clipped badge, mobile notary. "Good afternoon, Ms. Mercer," she said. "I was asked to stop by for signatures. I can be in and out in 10 minutes. Behind her, Elise waited on the walk posture, bright as a ribbon. Caleb stood farther back with his hands deep in his pockets as though he'd been drafted and didn't like the uniform. I stepped sideways so the notary could see the card on my door. She read out loud softly, "No documents will be signed in this home without independent counsel present." "I'm so sorry," she said, already tucking her pen away. "I wasn't told." "Not your fault," I said. "Drive safe." Elise's smile thinned to a line. "Mom, this is ridiculous," she said. "It's just a convenience." "Convenience," I said, "is how small doors get installed where walls used to be." The notary fled with professional speed. She knew when a living room wanted to be a courtroom. Elise turned heels, hammering punctuation down the steps. Caleb lingered long enough to look at me with that half apology a good man wears when he hasn't yet remembered how to say no to the person he loves. "Dinner tomorrow?" I asked him, as if we had only bumped into each other at the produce aisle. "I'll text," he said. After they drove away, I called Mr. Alvarez. "They brought a notary to the porch," I said. "Of course they did," he answered. "The notary saw your sign. Most people honor other people's rules. The ones who don't tell us what we need to know." He paused. "I'll add a line to my next letter about no witnesses on your property without advance consent." Before evening, I needed vinegar and envelopes. At the office supply store, I found myself 2 aisles over from Melissa's mother, who was talking to a clerk about credit card minimums. Money has a sound when it strains. You can hear it even when it's disguised as courtesy. I didn't stop or lean. I let the shelves be tall and my list be short. In the parking lot, while I loaded a bag into my trunk, voices carried the way they do in September. Air neither hot nor cold, words traveling like they were on their best behavior. Elise and her mother stood by the trunk of a pale sedan. I hadn't meant to hear. It fell to me anyway. "You can't keep floating balances," her mother said, and the softness had edges. "The planner needs a check. The photographer hasn't been paid. Daniel can't shift things again, he said so. Pike says if we get the authorization, we can consolidate and refinance in a week," Elise answered. "Caleb is trying, but she won't sign anything. She keeps hiding behind that old man." "Lawyers are doors," her mother said. "There's always another door." "Not with her," Elise said, and for the first time her voice was not polished. It was frayed. "She doesn't bend. She smiles and waits, and it is like trying to pull rope through a keyhole." They didn't see me. I moved on not because I was embarrassed to be caught listening, but because I didn't need to be a mirror for a conversation that had already confessed more than it planned. I drove home with vinegar and the certainty that the story I had suspected was now a thing with bones. On Sunday, I slipped into a chair in the fellowship hall after service. The Lydia Circle, our handful of women who traded prayer lists for casserole recipes and back again, had already gathered. Sharon patted the seat beside her with knuckles widened by time. "You've got to look," she said. "Tell it." I told the short version. No dramatics, just nouns and verbs and the names of papers. Ruth, who had once run the church office like a small country, nodded along and said, "Forms are volume dials. Turn yours up." June, whose son had moved states to convince her she couldn't live alone, said, "When they say we ask who signs the check, that's your answer to whether you're included in the pronoun." We wrote my boundaries on an index card in blue marker, and Ruth said, "Tape it by the door. It's not for them. It's for you on the days you're tired." We prayed the kind of prayer that doesn't ask for thunder, just for clean sight and strong knees. On Monday, Mr. Alvarez called with news in the shape of a non-event. Pike declined the HIPAA and the contact form, he said. He says it's insufficient for family needs. That's our answer. "What now?" I asked. "Now we put it in writing so the file is brighter than anyone's memory. Then we wait without panic." He paused. "They may try a different door." The different door arrived that afternoon at 4:10 when a woman from Adult Protective Services phoned to ask if she could schedule a well check. Her voice was kind, practiced, unthreatening. "We received a call expressing concern that you might be confused about your finances." I looked at the binder, at the index card, at the brass key, watching like a small witness. "You're welcome to come," I said. "Bring a notebook. Bring 2. She came the next morning. I set 2 mugs on the table, and we went through what amounted to a miniature exam. She asked what day it was. I pointed to the kitchen calendar with 3 birthdays circled in different colors. She asked about bills. I opened the binder. She asked if anyone had pressured me. I told the truth without adjectives. At the end, she smiled in a way that used her whole face. "You'd be surprised how often we find people fine in paperwork, Farrell," she said. "Your paperwork wants to sit for tea." She left her card and a pamphlet with the optimistic title, "Staying Strong, Staying Smart," and promised to note the file. An hour later, Caleb texted, "Can I stop by after work?" I wrote yes and added a lemon to the bowl because my mother taught me that a house looks braver when there is fruit visible. He arrived with that tired sideways look men get when their minds have been sawed in half by loyalty. We sat. He didn't touch the tea. They called APS. He said the words landing, like he didn't know whether to apologize for them or adopt them. "I made tea for Apps," I said. The woman was thorough. He had the grace to grin at the picture. Then he sobered. "Elise thinks you hate her." "I don't," I said. "I dislike the plan. She thinks it's the only way." "It's not. It's the fastest way, and the fastest way is usually rented." He breathed out. I told her I wouldn't bring a notary again. "That's not a small sentence," I said. "I didn't used to think I needed sentences at home," he said, looking at his hands. "Things were just assumed." Then we had to pay deposits, and there were slippages, and I kept thinking, if I could just get you to sign the one thing, then I could fix the other things, without admitting I'd let the first things get bigger than me. "Good men make honest messes," I said. "Great men tell the truth when the mess asks for it." He swallowed. "If we don't solve it the quick way, Elise's mom says they'll have to sell her father's boat and maybe their lake place. She calls it liquidity. Other people's nouns are not your emergency," I said, "or mine." He stood to pace, then sat because pacing in my kitchen looked silly, and he remembered that. He pressed his palms flat on the table. "I need a script," he said, "something I can say that isn't a fight." "Try this," I said and wrote on another card. "I won't move my mother's boundaries. I will help where I can with my own work and choices. Our marriage can survive disappointment. It can't survive disrespect." He read it, smiled in that small, merciful way he had as a boy, when a hard truth made more sense than a soft lie. He put the card in his shirt pocket like it might steady his heartbeat. "Thank you," he said, "for not making me choose." "You did choose," I said. "You chose your character. That's the only thing that follows you home." The family meeting invitation arrived by email the next day. Elise CC'd Mr. Pike primary, Caleb BCC'd if I had to guess. They proposed a neutral site, a conference room at a co-working space with glass walls and anonymized furniture. Mr. Alvarez accepted on my behalf and copied me. "I'll bring the binder," he wrote. "You bring your spine. We'll let their room look expensive." The building smelled of coffee and something intended to pass for inspiration. We were shown to a room with a white table and chairs that wanted you to remember your posture. Elise wore a pale suit. Her mother came too in a dress the color of money in photographs. Mr. Pike arranged his binder like a chess set. Caleb took the chair that looks at a corner. Mr. Alvarez started. "Thank you for meeting," he said, and slid 2 documents across the table, the HIPAA release and the contact preferences. "These are the forms our client will sign today. They meet the stated concern communication in a medical event without conferring any financial or managerial authority." Mr. Pike didn't touch them. "We appreciate the thought," he said, "but the family needs the ability to act quickly in unforeseen situations." "Define unforeseen," Mr. Alvarez said. His voice made the word sound like a door that could slam if you stuck your fingers in the jamb. "Situations where Ms. Mercer is," confused Mr. Pike said, and the room cooled. Mr. Alvarez smiled without warmth. "The trust already defines incapacity and the procedure to determine it. 2 physicians separate examinations, same findings. Anything short of that honors her agency. Anything else honors your timeline." Elise's mother leaned forward. "My son-in-law is trying to be a good husband," she said. "He's under pressure. A little flexibility would make everyone's life easier." "Flexible contracts wrap around the wrong people," Mr. Alvarez said. "Rigid ones wrap around the facts." Elise's eyes flashed. "You act like we're thieves." "I act like I am paid to make sure a woman keeps the life she built," Mr. Alvarez said. He slid another paper across. "Here is our written boundary. No additional authority granted. All communication through counsel. Do not contact third parties about Ms. Mercer's finances or health without consent. Sign to acknowledge receipt." Mr. Pike took out a pen, considered it, then set it down and said, "We'll review." "Fine," Mr. Alvarez said. "The signature is a courtesy for your file, not a permission slip." Caleb's chair creaked. In that small noise, I heard everything he wanted to say and hadn't yet found how. I reached into my bag and pulled out a lemon. I set it on the table between us as if I were preparing to make tea. He saw it and almost laughed. The room did not know what to do with a lemon in a meeting. "We're done," Mr. Alvarez said gently, as if the outcome had never once been in doubt. He stood. I stood. Caleb stood with a look that asked a question nobody else in the room could hear. Elise stared at the lemon like it had spoiled something. In the hallway afterward, Mr. Alvarez leaned so I could hear him over the espresso machine. They'll try the county records again, he said. They'll look for soft spots in accounts. We've already placed the freezes. You'll get a mailer confirming. You may get more calls that pretend to be for your good. And if they push with doctors, then your doctors will call me, he said, and we'll follow your papers, which are better than most people's prayers. On the sidewalk, Caleb hugged me without asking if he could. Men become boys at their mother's shoulders. That's not regression, it's a map. I'm coming over for dinner, he said. Wednesday, I said. Bring your appetite in your car with the noisy belt. He nodded, and there was gratitude in it, and something like relief that had finally found a bench. That evening, I sliced one of the lemons and set the bright rounds in a jar with water. The kitchen smelled like clean choices. I wrote the date in the binder and underlined it. Marian would have approved of both the underlining and the jar. She loved emphasis that did not shout. Just before bed, the phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. Think of Michael. This is hurting him. Be reasonable. I stood very still and let the old habit rise, the one that wants to fix discomfort by absorbing it. Then I put the phone down and read the card by the door out loud to the empty room. The room did not argue. Outside, the desert night did what it always does. It kept its sound low and its sky extravagant. I placed the brass key in my palm and closed my hand until the metal warmed. The kettle breathed once as the house settled. We have our rituals so we don't mistake noise for news. In the morning, I woke with the simple plan that had kept me through harder years than this: make tea water the root's answer with respect sign. Nothing I didn't write the rules for. The day would bring whatever it wanted. I had pencils with erasers and papers with signatures and friends who prayed in lowercase. Some wars end with banners. Mine would end one day with a click of a key and a garden that had learned the worth of slow water. For now, that was enough. The week after the glass-walled meeting moved like a careful train, slow on time and unwilling to jump tracks for anyone waving on the platform. The mail brought formal confirmations from the credit bureaus. Each envelope felt heavier than paper has a right to be. The bank called with a test of the voice password Mr. Alvarez and I had set. Street where your mother learned to ride a bicycle, the woman asked. I spoke the answer and a small gate opened in a system I could not see. It was ordinary and it was victory. Someone tried another door, of course they did. A smooth man phoned near dinner time claiming to be from the Senior Benefits Division, eager to verify my enrollment information. He had the tone of a neighbor with a casserole and a clipboard. I asked him to read me the last 4 digits of my file, and he read me 4 numbers at random. I set the receiver on the table and let the kettle cover his voice. When I picked it up again, he was gone, maybe to dial someone whose house didn't have cards on the doors. On Thursday, Mrs. Walker from Adult Protective Services called to close the file. Everything looks tidy, she said, and I imagined her desk neat as mine. If anyone raises concerns again, we'll note we already visited and found you not only well but well organized. I thanked her and wrote the word closed on a sticky note I did not need and stuck it inside the binder anyway, because sometimes the hand needs to write the thing the heart already knows. That evening I took the car to the curb so Caleb could get to the belt that squealed like a complaint. He arrived with a toolbox and a face that had learned something new about being a man. We worked in the slow way we always did. Me handing him the socket he asked for, him telling me what he was doing, though I couldn't fix a belt any more than he could knit a sweater. When it was quiet under the hood, we sat on the steps and listened to the neighborhood decide what to cook. I told Elise I'm not bringing papers here again, he said. I know, I said. I heard your voice at the conference room when you didn't use it. He smiled. I also told her we can't solve a 6-figure year with a signature. We're meeting a counselor, someone from her church. We're going to make a list of what can be sold and what can be stopped. He swallowed. I told her a marriage can survive disappointment. It can't survive disrespect. That line looks good on you, I said. He nodded toward the binder visible through the screen door. Do you ever get tired of guarding? Yes, I said, but getting tired is not the same as giving up. I nudged his shoulder, and I don't do it alone. He looked where I looked at the 3 roses near the fence, heavy with late blooms, because I fed them when everyone else forgot. Marian would say to cut 2 and put 1 in water, he said. Marian would say to cut 3 and take 1 to the neighbor who lost her dog last week, I corrected. And we both laughed, the kind of laugh that stitches 2 memories into one. Friday brought an email from Mr. Pike, brisk as a tap on a glass. We will not be moving forward with additional documents at this time. Please direct any future concerns to my office. Mr. Alvarez read it, then called. Translation: they've run out of persuasive nouns, he said. Keep your protocols. I'll stay on the file. What about the HIPAA form, I asked. He chuckled. It remains signed and valid. The best piece is the one you planned for before anyone else tried to borrow it. Saturday morning, our Lydia Circle held a paperwork day in the fellowship hall. June set up a table labeled passwords, not the real ones, just a list of what to list. Ruth brought laminated checklists for what to keep and where to put it. Sharon wrote in block letters on a whiteboard. Forms are volume dials. The hall smelled like coffee and printer toner, and the kind of determination older women wear like perfume. I sat with a widower who kept apologizing for not understanding direct deposit. "Stop apologizing," I said. "We'll read it as many times as it takes." When he left with a folder labeled House Rules, he hugged the air near my shoulder as if he knew Marion would have approved of the font. In the afternoon, I clipped roses 3 as instructed by 2 ghosts and walked one next door. Mrs. Gutierrez cried quietly in her doorway, the way people cry when the dog is gone but the leash is still on the hook. I didn't say anything that would mistake sympathy for repair. I put the flower in a jar with water from my hose and listened while she told me the dog's whole life in 10 minutes. "You're a good listener," she said at the end. "It's self-defense," I answered, and we both smiled. The last attempt came on a Sunday, weather soft and indecisive. Elise arrived alone, no briefcase in sight, no lawyer, like a shadow. She stood on the porch long enough to read the card twice. The wind pushed her hair across her face, and she did not tuck it behind her ear. She let it be untidy. I opened the door and held it with my foot, because hinges are truth-tellers. "Can we talk?" she asked. Her voice was smaller than it had been in rooms with glass. "In the garden," I said. "I don't sign in gardens, I listen there." We sat where the rosemary crowds the metal chairs. She looked at her hands and then at the feeder where a hummingbird did its work like a proverb. "I was wrong to push," she said, not looking at me yet. I was scared and proud, and I kept telling myself if I could just get you to do this one thing, everything else would stop feeling like drowning. "Drowning is loud," I said. "Silence is not rescue, it is air." She let out a breath that sounded like someone had opened a window. "I don't know how to say sorry without it sounding like a new plan." "Then don't add a plan," I said. "Just say the word and let it be heavy." "I'm sorry," she said. It landed. "I don't expect you to forgive me today." "I'm not a bank," I said. "I don't process forgiveness on a timetable." I poured water at the base of the rosemary. "But I can do 2 things at once, keep my boundary and not hate you." She looked up then. Her eyes were sharp but not mean, like a pencil that had finally met paper. "I don't like how you live," she said. "It's so slow." "Slow isn't refusal," I said. "It's precision." She almost smiled. "Caleb says your sentences are index cards." "Some of them," I said, and offered her a lemon from the bowl I'd brought out without thinking. She didn't take it. She wasn't ready to hold symbols yet. That was fine. She set both hands flat on her knees. "We're selling the lake place," she said. "The boat already went." It felt like cutting my hair off. "Hair grows," I said. She stood. "I don't know if I can be the kind of wife your son needs. You will be the kind of wife you decide to be," I said. "He can decide what he needs." I pointed to the card on the back door. "You will decide how you behave at my house." Those are all separate powers. That's how adults keep love from turning into leverage. She nodded once, a hinge that might not squeak the next time. On her way out, she paused at the porch, read the door card again, and said without sarcasm, "I might need one of those." "I have a spare," I said. "Come back another day and I'll laminate it for you." After she left, I sat long enough to watch a line of ants find and fix a problem only they could see. The house hummed like a throat before a song. Inside, I opened the binder and slid in a new page, letter of wishes written in my hand. It wasn't law, just guidance scholarships for girls who fix things with their hands, a bench at the library where I shelved novels most of my life, a note, asking future people to leave my roses in the yard, even if they change everything else. I took the blue folder with Marion's script and laid my letter on top. "We're still a team," I told her out loud to a room that already knew. On Monday, the counselor sent Caleb home with homework, 3 columns labeled, "Keep, Cut, Sell." He brought them to my table not for approval, but because paper felt safer in a house that respected it. We didn't move anything to Mom. We moved some things to time and some to later and some to, "I'm sorry." He wore the look of a man who had learned that certain forms of peace are only available after you stop trying to buy them. That night, the sky above Mesa did what it always does when it wants you to remember who is big and who is not. It threw down stars like nails and held the whole roof on. I turned the brass key in the safe and heard the click I measure seasons by. The kettle took its first breath. I set 2 cups out of habit and hope, because I have learned that readiness is a kind of welcome. People think victory sounds like trumpets. In my house, it sounds like pages sliding into a binder, like water given to roots, like a son reading his own handwriting back to himself at the sink. The gate stays closed, the heart stays open, and the quiet I kept for years is not an absence. It is a choice. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.